All right, welcome back to Sports Analytics Club. It's the last one of the semester. It's been a great semester and year with everyone. So before we get into presentations, let's do a few other things. So we've talked about going to a baseball game, either Thursday or Friday. Yeah, being able to see the slides would be nice for you guys. All right, cool. So votes are split, as in like there was a 1 vote difference, and obviously I want people to come if they can. What are everybody's thoughts on going to the game tomorrow if ECU versus NC State? Because it's free, and then it should be a reading day, so everybody should have that could be able to come. Sure. Is that everybody else down? Cool. We're gonna plan on that instead of going to the Mudcats game this weekend.
What time is tomorrow?
It's a great question. Someone look that up for me real quick. Yeah, 6 sounds right, but you're not 100% sure. So the students, if you've never been to a baseball game, sit on the hill. So we'll go to the hill with all the students. So it'll be fun. Next part. So officer for the 2023 and 24 school year, Brandon is going to be our president. So that's Brandon. Other board positions, we're still working out positions and stuff. Matt, Brian can't be here. He's on the board this year. He had a class at this time. Kris is in the back. Evan is new on the board, and Carl is new on the board as well. Super exciting. We have 4 of us rotating off this year, and so super excited to see what y'all do next. So this is the order for presentations. So we're gonna go basketball, football, hockey, running, softball, and then me. Highlighted where the people have their slides, but I got y'all's too just now, so we're all good. Ordered by letters so that when you come up, there's a folder right here that just has everyone's name and the letter next to it. So it's just alphabetically going on the list. So I'm going to move to a seat right there. And then Kris, you're first up. You just come up here, and the way that we have it recording, like the cameras in the back, will get you and the slides. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. My name is Kris, if you missed the board introductions. And I'm from Atlanta, which is why I chose to do my project on Trae and the Hawks, and it's time for them to break up. I would be very sad about it, but it's just time for it to happen. So right here, I have something posted from Reddit today, actually, that says Trae is the first player ever to score 35. I'm sorry, not ever, but score 35, dish 15 assists, have 1 or fewer turnovers in a playoff game. And this was posted like today from the most recent game, which is funny. And you see at the very bottom, it says, of course, even though he did this really big thing, we want to see if he actually sucks, which has been like the big thing about him in his career. So a bit of the background, if you remember the 2021 Eastern Conference Finals, or if you watched then, we had like a really great Cinderella run, and we lost to the Bucks. But since then, we've been through 3 head coaches, plethora of teammates, supporting cast, guys rotating in and out, injuries, trades, things like that. Deontay Murray joined this last offseason and played with us this season, and he's suspended for game 5, which I learned about an hour ago, so that's always fun. And on the right there, or my right at least, some of the things that led to Nate McMillan, our old coach, getting fired, they just had like a very public beef. And obviously, like he argued with the guy's wife. So a lot was happening. And it's not all Trae's fault the way the season went, of course. There's, as you can see, a lot of turmoil inside the organization, but somebody has to be held to blame for it. So this year, the Hawks were the definition of mid after adding a second star. There's that TikTok where they went 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, 4-4, et cetera. 26-26, we ended 41-41. So the very definition of mid was the Atlanta Hawks. And with a player the caliber of Trae Young and adding another star in Deontay Murray, this should not be happening. And this is, I think, his 4th or 5th season. So we're expecting another step forward. That just did not happen. And I want to look into why, because like we said, we've been through a lot of teammates, we've been through a lot of coaches, and Trae Young is the only constant through all that. So I wanted to see if he might potentially be the reason for it. And the elephant in the room, obviously, is his defense. He's a bad defender, just to put it plain and simple, but he's great offensively. That was never the issue with Trae Young or the Hawks. They can score, but can they stop people from scoring? And by the record of 41-41, obviously we could not. So I found this from the same Reddit thread earlier. This guy claims, he was like, the defense criticism is not warranted. Like Trae's improved. I've been a little busy, so I haven't been able to watch the Hawks games. So I decided to look into some stats to see if this guy was telling the truth or if he was lying. And he's kind of right. So let's focus here on the yellow highlighted boxes first. That's defensive win shares and defensive box plus or minus. The two highlighted ones specifically are from last season and the most recent season. So he did improve with defensive win shares. They went up about half a share, which made me think like this guy might accept some legitimacy to him, but his defensive box plus or minus stayed exactly the same. If you're familiar with most metrics, but especially defensive ones, they often don't go hand in hand. So a player might increase or stay the same in one and decrease in the other. And so that's what we see here. So he might not necessarily have improved. I would chalk it up as inconclusive, but the other main takeaway is that you see his offensive stats have dropped significantly from last season to this most recent season, while his defensive stats have gone up just a hair. And so the question that should be asked is that drop off worth it? How has it affected the Hawks? How has it affected Trae Young and things of that nature? And so the big takeaway is that, again, his defense hasn't necessarily gotten worse, but you can't argue it's gotten better. And so for a guy of his caliber playing on this team in the Eastern Conference, I personally don't know if I can take that. His reduced offensive output, even with the addition of Dejounte Murray, has lowered his overall contribution. If you saw that on his win shares, they decreased from the past year, which was to be expected. He's sharing the ball more. He had a career high in assist percentage and things of that nature. So it's not all his fault, but from a guy of this caliber, he should be doing more. And it's more the same for the Hawks the past few years. They're bucket getters, but not really bucket stoppers. And so if we try to win shootouts every game, we're going to be a very mid team, as you saw, 41 or 41. So we need defense. They've been saying that for years. And I think it's going to come through a trade. I don't think we're going to have enough in-house improvement. Guys just are going to get better overnight, even with a new head coach and Quinn Snyder. We're not going to take the steps forward that we need to in order to really be a contender in the Eastern Conference. So I think scour the internet. The Bulls, and Zach LaVine specifically, is the best trade target I think the Hawks should have in mind. As you can see, the LaVine, DeRozan, Vucevic, we ended up bottom 10 offense for Chicago. I know Lonzo was hurt, so that was part of that. But you could argue that fit on the court just didn't work. And so additionally, LaVine has a comparable contract to Trae Young, so they don't have to play any cap gymnastics or things like that to make this trade work. And again, there's no timetable for Lonzo Ball's injury for the Bulls, which means the Bulls really need a point guard. Trae Young happens to be a point guard, so this is something that can actually work out. And I believe, at least, the proof is in the pudding. If you trade firepower for defense, which is exactly what the Hawks need to do, they will become a more balanced team, a more rounded team, which is ironic from arguably the most mid team in the league. I highlighted win shares per 48 minutes as my biggest argument towards this, because you see, even though Trae Young, he had less true shooting stats, he wasn't as good offensively. In some aspects, he was better in some other aspects. The win shares between LaVine and Trae Young are almost eerily similar per 48 minutes. So obviously they don't have the same impact. They're not the same player, but LaVine fits better on the court with Murray and with the rest of the Hawks team that we have. And you can see that clearly by the potential for win shares, also value over replacement player, different things like that. And of course, with a new head coach, it's going to take time to work these things out. But in short, LaVine is the guy we need. And Trae, on the other hand, he does a lot of things really well, but the things he doesn't do that well are very, very noticeable. And so the trade, I use NBA trade analyzer, threw him in there. We can see the trade. They're saying whoever's getting Trae Young is going to be, benefiting from this trade, which makes sense. Trae Young is younger than LaVine. The Bulls are, you can argue, in a better situation. So I would say the Bulls should throw in a first-round pick because Trae is younger. He's going to continue to improve. He's more adaptable. LaVine's on the older side. He's had a major injury. All these things to consider is why I argue that the Hawks should get an additional first-round pick if they trade Trae Young. Again, they don't have to play any cap gymnastics, which is really nice because their contracts are comparable, at least right now. And I think that is it. So any questions? I can go back if you need me to. If you're not big into basketball, the Hawks have sucked for a long time, and I really want them to be better. And I think they need to make a splash if they're going to be better. And this is what they should do. They should go all in. The Braves let Freddie Freeman walk. The Falcons let Matt Ryan walk. So I think the Hawks might need to swing the fences and see what happens. Go ahead.
So when they traded for Dejounte Murray, wasn't he known as like a good defensive player? And
Yeah.
So how did that pan out?
Right. So it's not here in these slides, but Murray was the prevailing narrative was that Murray's going to shore up Trae Young's limited wingspan, cover him up defensively a little bit. And that did happen to a little bit of an extent. It's not here in the presentation, but I was looking through like player value on the Hawks and then on off court stuff like that. So Murray actually had like a negative off court rating. Like we were better with him off the court, which was really interesting in terms of like overall value. but like we couldn't stop anything, whether it's backcourt, front court. So the narrative was like, yeah, he's gonna shore up the defense. That did not happen. And I might be remembering this wrong, but I think we signed him to an extension, which means that he's going to be around a while. It's really hard to trade a guy you just signed to an extension. So to answer your question, we got him to shore up defense and take some load off Trae Young. And he took some load off Trae Young, but he didn't really shore up the defense, whether it's the backcourt, front court, half court. So what we thought was going to happen didn't happen, and we got to reevaluate and see where we can go there. I say we like I work for the Hawks. I don't. Go ahead, Tyson.
Do you think Trae Young could ever be the best player on a championship team at his peak?
Do I think peak Trae Young could be the best player on a championship team? I don't, because I think best player, especially in the playoffs where the stars shine brightest, as they say, they have to be able to play, they have to be able to hold up defensively. I won't say they need to be like a all defensive, first, second, third team guy or a defensive player of the year. But even if you look at like Curry in his prime or other stars like that, even LeBron in his prime, defensively, they can hold it down a little bit. And I know Trae Young has improved defensively, but I actually want to go back here and see. If you look at his defensive win shares from 2019 to 2020 and 2020 to 2021, obviously you saw a big jump from 2020 to 2021. I'm sorry, from 19 to 22 to 20 to 21. But the 2021 season, that's about in line of where he was this year. And his offensive output is actually about in line too, even though we have Murray and other guys like that. So realistically, I don't see Trae Young improving that much from where he is now. I mean, like he took a step back in terms of like overall shooting, 3-point shooting, things like that. So if he improves in that area, I still don't think he'll be like the best player on a championship team. He can be a solid number 2 because he can score from anywhere. He can drive. He can shoot threes from miles away. But I don't think he has enough defensive capabilities, which, I mean, he's undersized, but kind of like Isaiah Thomas. Of course, he's taller than Isaiah Thomas, but Isaiah Thomas was a bucket getter. Trae's a bucket getter. But if he's leading your championship team, you're going to need like a Rudy Gobert, a Giannis, an Embiid, somebody like that to pick it up on the defensive end.
That's good stuff, Kris. Give him one more round of applause. You could X out your slides.
Yeah.
And pull the next one up.
Let's do this.
Ben. Just for me. Can you cut off the or shut the doors?
Yeah.
All right. So, as many of you guys may know, three-pointers in the NBA have been on a tremendous rise recently. Teams are shooting more threes than ever, and it seems like they're picking up wins, and the best teams keep having better and better records in the regular season. But there's also a prevailing narrative that teams that shoot a lot of three-pointers, they don't go very far in the playoffs. You live by the three, and then you die by the three in the must-win situations. The prime example of this is the 2017-2018 Houston Rockets. #1 record in the league with 65-17, MVP James Harden, All-Star Chris Paul, and they took the KD and Steph Curry Warriors to Game 7 in the Western Conference Finals. And when they got there, they missed 27 three-pointers in a row and shot 7 for 44 in the game and lost. So no surprise. And they're considered one of the best teams of all time to never win a championship. So do teams that shoot lots of threes underperform in the playoffs? Because we've seen Steph and Clay do it for years and years now. Why does everybody seem to think this just based on James Harden and the Houston Rockets? So here's what I did. This is the regular season from seasons, the 2015 season to last season. And I did the 3-point attempt percentage, which is the percentage of shots that a team takes that are 3-pointers. And I plotted them for the 1 through 4 seeds in the regular season, 4 through 8 seeds, and non-playoff teams. And I took a t-test for playoff teams and non-playoff teams, and I found that there was a significant difference. Teams that shoot more threes in the regular season tend to perform better and are more likely to make the playoffs. And then I also did the 3-point 10% rank to standardize it across the years and provide more of a gap, and we found even more significant results. So since the 2014-2015 season, the teams that shoot more threes in the regular season tend to perform better. But how does this compare to the playoffs? This is the, it says right there, the average 3-point percentage by playoff teams in the regular season versus when they get to the playoffs. And in every single year since 2015, they shoot worse. Due to the high pressure, I guess. So here's what I did. I did the 3-point attempt percentage I went through every game in the playoffs and I put the team's 3-point attempt percentage and I calculated the average for teams that won and the average for teams that lost by round. And we found that teams that win and teams that lose have very, very similar 3-point attempt percentages with no statistical significance. So how can we explain like what makes the difference in the playoffs if it's not 3-pointers? And to that I say, nobody cares about numbers. It's all about the stars and what they can do. So I just did this on last season because I tried to do it for all the seasons and it was taking weeks and weeks. So I picked every team in the playoffs last season and I put their best player. And if you disagree with me, you're wrong. And here's what I did. I plotted their game scores. I did the same thing. I did game by game, and I plotted the game score of the best player on the winning team and the game score of the best player on the losing team, and averaged them up by round. And we found that there was statistical significance. So when the best player performs better, the team's more likely to win. That's really all there is to it. So in conclusion, 3-pointers rule the regular season, but they do not guarantee a championship. You live by the 3, you die by the 3. And star power controls the outcome in the playoffs. Best player if your best player can't get it together, the team will choke. And it's all about the intangibles and clutch factor that make the difference when it matters most. That's it.
Questions? All right, Brandon.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about Lamar Jackson and where the hell is this guy's contract? He was on the franchise tag last year. They put him on the franchise tag again this year, and he requested to be traded. He wants a long-term deal. He's not getting one. They're at a stalemate. So I'm going to talk about how they got there and where can we go from here. So Lamar Jackson, if you don't know who he is, he's a really good quarterback. Drafted in 2018 out of Louisville, won the Heisman, won the MVP the year after. Been very successful in the regular season, as you can see here. Obviously, he peaked out in 2019 when he won the MVP. But do notice that his games played has gone down after that. And the past 2 years, he hasn't finished the regular season and hasn't been as available for the playoffs. So that's been a moot point between him and the team. But again, he's really good in the regular season. Just how good, you may ask? Well, I'll tell you. So he's really good at throwing the ball, has a high completion percentage, and he's a lethal weapon on the ground. And this graph here, I compare the EPA per play and rushing yards per game. And if you don't know what EPA per play is, they're this model that takes your down, distance, and field position, and it spits out how many points you're expected to get on that drive. And then the play after that, it subtracts, and that's your expected points added. So that attributes value to a player and determines how much you're adding to your team's offense. So as you can see here, if you ignore the unicorn in the bottom right corner, Lamar Jackson is unparalleled in his ability to get it done on the ground and through the air. However, he hasn't been as good in the playoffs. As you can see here, he has some more interceptions and he has touchdowns in his 4 playoff games. And then next to that, I have his EPA for each play in the playoff game. So you can see here, I don't know if you can read that. The top one is his wildcard game against the Chargers. And then the next two are divisional against Tennessee, his MVP year. And then after that, his divisional round against Buffalo, and then his wild card win, his only win against the Titans. And so I have it charted for each quarter, and each little blip represents a play and where it ranks, whether it adds value, if it's above 0, if it's below, then it's detracting value. So I compared that graph you see on the right with other quarterbacks who did get contracts. So you see on the left, we have Daniel Jones, and on the right, we have Jalen Hurts. And even though Daniel Jones kind of crapped the bed against the Eagles in the divisional round, he did earn himself that $160 million contract against the Vikings. I think out of the graphs we've seen, that's the most value added over the course of the game. I think he had like 400 passing yards. He won a shootout. And then Jalen Hurts, besides that fumble against the Chiefs, he really balled out for the entire playoffs. He was consistently making plays, and he was putting his team in a position to win. So, in order to understand why Lamar Jackson doesn't have the contract that he wants, I think you need to understand how contracts work. So I'm not going to read that whole thing, but the important thing to take away is that you have guaranteed money and you have non-guaranteed money. And if you see a quarterback signed to a deal, that's your sticker amount. Picture like you're buying a car, but not all of it's fully guaranteed. And that's usually a point of contention, that amount of guaranteed money can be dispersed out in different ways. And how teams spend their money they want to juggle it around the salary cap, which changes year to year. And important thing to note, like I said earlier, he's been playing on the franchise tag for the past 1, potentially 2 seasons, which each team only gets 1 designated salary or designated franchise tag for each player, which delays them from going into unrestricted free agency. So I talked about how teams spend money, or why teams spend money, and here's how. So in this graph, I have how teams on average have allocated their spending, with the red line as the salary cap, which has changed year to year depending on league revenue. And as you can see, quarterback spending has stayed roughly the same the past 4 years, but non-quarterback spending has gone up. And the purple lines you see are Lamar Jackson's salary, and the lines above that are the salaries of each quarterback who won the Super Bowl. That's why we don't have one for 2023 yet. So Brady, Stafford, and Mahomes, in that order, each have made significantly more than Brady each year. So I compared Lamar Jackson with other quarterbacks who've recently inked contracts. So these are quarterbacks in the past 3-4 years who have signed contracts that are more than $100 million. And Jackson wants something he was offered a $200 million contract, fully guaranteed, but he turned it down. So you can see here, the bars differentiate between the contract amount and the guaranteed money. So I'll take Dak Prescott example on the left. There's a little thing sticking out above. That's his contract. His mohawk. That's what was guaranteed, $160 million. And you can't see it underneath, so I picked a bad example. But he was guaranteed $126 million. You can see it with Jalen Hurts. That's pretty clear too. Something like north of $250 million, with like $179 guaranteed. And then Patrick Mahomes, his contract's an anomaly, with $450 million guaranteed, or $450 million total, but he only has $141 million guaranteed. The reason why that's so low is because after, I think, 2027, basically none of the contracts guaranteed. It's all in the form of roster bonuses, which he would get at the beginning of each season, provided he is on the team. So that's the way that the Chiefs were able to secure that contract and able to sign other talent to stay competitive. But the one point I want to make here from this graph is Deshaun Watson. And if you're saying, hey, there's no bar, you're right, there isn't. That's because his contract is fully guaranteed. A $230 million contract, fully guaranteed, that the Browns gave to him a year after he was suspended for misconduct. I don't know why any team with more than 2 brain cells would do that, given his circumstances. He is a talented player, but no team was even offering anything close. And that really screwed up the market for Lamar Jackson because he wants something around there. He wants Watson money fully guaranteed, and he doesn't have an agent. Most of these players have agents that work out the specific details of contracts, but Lamar is representing himself. He has to play football and negotiate a contract at the same time, and evidently it hasn't worked out to his favor. So lastly, the reason Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, hasn't gotten the money he deserves is, well, A, he hasn't been available or as successful in the playoffs as his richer counterparts have been. And B, the Browns. They stupidly signed Deshaun Watson to as lucrative of a deal as basically you can sign with that amount of guaranteed money. And it gives no room for the Ravens and Lamar to negotiate and have an amicable working relationship. That's it.
Right, so if you're an NFL GM, what do you tell Lamar? What would you be your comparison contract wise for what you were offering him?
I would give him more than the 230 overall, probably like 235, 240, but only I would guarantee more just to satisfy him. I don't think he'd sign it. I would do 240 with like 185 guaranteed. It's less than Hurts money because Hurts has been better recently, but I still think that amount, it's more guaranteed money than Hurts. And you could do that over 4 years, 5 years, whatever. Seems right. Robbie, that Tyson.
What if it's a manager slash says wants an all guaranteed contract?
Well, then we
How much would you be able to get?
see. I don't know the Ravens full cap situation right now. I should have looked into that, but I wouldn't be willing to offer fully guaranteed with that kind of money. Maybe I'd be willing to go past 200 million guaranteed, but not more, not much more. And then Tyson.
I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked Chris. Do you think Lamar Jackson is quarterback?
Not in the AFC. He would have to go through Allen, Burrow, and Mahomes, or a combination of them every year just to get to the Super Bowl. If he can get in the NFC, get a really good roster around him. Say if you put him on the Niners right now, I'd say they'd be Super Bowl favorites. But because he's in the AFC, their division isn't bad. It's not like he's in the NFC South. But given his circumstances, no.
Thank you, Brandon. Else for you?
Okay, so I'm Julia. This is Evan and Kenlee, and our presentation is looking into Patrick Mahomes' performance compared to the overall Chiefs' performance. So this first chart is just a general QBR versus points they won by in the years 2019 through 2022. So you can see 2021, the green line has the most correlation, it looks like, and between them winning, and then this is just breaking it down by year so you can compare the individual years. So 2019 looks like it has the flattest slope. It has the lowest R value and R squared value. And then 2021 has the most variability between the QBR and points won by. And then 2020 had the highest QBR average over the past 4 years.
So we also looked at EPA per play against points won by. It's kind of like the same deal, like most of the lines are relatively flat. And like 2019 has the steepest slope, but it's relatively spread out. Here it is broken down again, and 2019 has the highest R value, so it has the most correlation there. And 2020 had the highest EPA per play average of the 4 years, but relatively, again, it's very spread out, so it's hard to tell. Like Patrick Mahomes, like he does add points, but really not much.
And so after our data, we found that there wasn't a super strong correlation between these stats of Patrick Mahomes and the actual win percentage or how much they won by. So we can't really say there was a direct correlation. And so we looked at, last semester, we looked at 2019 and 2021 only. And so this semester we added 2019 to 2022, all the stats for all 4 of those years. However, after looking at this, I realized that the 2018 season, he actually had the highest QBR rating. So I think that would have been interesting to look at because 2018 was his first like full starting year. But they didn't make it as far as they have in the past 4 years. And even though these graphs varied between the 2 sets of data and there wasn't a strong correlation, there was a correlation between the QBR and the EPA per play. And so the lowest QBR for each season also matched the lowest or the highest EPA per season. So the season where he had the highest QBR, he also had the highest EPA per play.
So would you say he's falling off, or that everybody else is just getting better?
I think that the team is getting better overall. But even with like after they lost Tyreek Hill, like he's still like people said they were going to get bad, and then obviously they had one of the best seasons. So I think he also like he played a big part in that.
And was this just for the regular season or for the playoffs too?
Just regular season.
Stuff.
Let me get this in slideshow mode. All right, hi everyone. My name is Matthew Roepke. I was also on the advisor board when we did that. I took every single team that made the Super Bowl since 2002, winner or loser, and kind of just put them on a chart based on how impressive their run to the Super Bowl was. I did baseball last year with a group of people, and that was fun, but I don't know a dang thing about baseball. Professional football is what I grew up
Well,
watching.
that's your topic. I thought you meant every run in this like
No.
play at Super Bowl. I was like, oh my God. Anyways, sorry.
Nah. So just talking a little bit about what I did. I'll try to make this quick. I started with 2002 because that's when the NFL expanded to 32 teams, and I think that's enough of a sample size. And I got these 4 categories for what people usually look at for in any sport really for how good a team's Super Bowl run is, how dominant the team was, which was just how many yards and how many points did they have like themselves compared to for the game. I'm like everyone else. I think high scoring football is more fun. So that's all that is. Sports Reference, which is where I got all my data from, had a stat about points above expected, which was just how many more points did the team score the game than they were, again, quote unquote, expected to. It was like Brandon's like for the quarterback, but for the whole team. And then tension, this was completely arbitrary. I made this up myself, but it's just points. The game's closer, points taken away if the game's a blowout, because I don't care how many crazy plays there are. If the game's 30-0, it's not that exciting. This is the chart I had I only plotted dominance and fun because those were the 2 I wanted to use the most. And there's not that much of a correlation between them. Every single team that won the Super Bowl has a star. Every single team that didn't win the Super Bowl has a box. I couldn't do an L. That would have been funnier, but I couldn't make one. One of the other things I wanted to mention, there wasn't really a negative correlation between dominance and tension. There were for some teams, of course, but just because one team was playing a lot better than the other didn't necessarily mean the game was close, whether that just be due to turnovers, penalties, whatever. I thought there was going to be a negative correlation between these two. There really wasn't. So that's about it. I was just going to talk about a couple teams that stuck out to me. Denver 2015, they had the worst dominant score out of any of the Super Bowl winners. They're that orange dot down at the bottom because they played pretty bad against the Steelers and they played pretty bad against the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, but they did kind of walk over the Panthers, which sucked, but that happened. I also wanted to mention their fun score and their clutchness score with almost 13 less points a game than they should have had were both the worst out of everybody, not just Super Bowl winners. But when I have their numbers down here, that is, I sorted them by Super Bowl winners, Super Bowl losers. So it's not that they're 20th out of 42, they're 20th out of 21 Super Bowl winners, for example. Then Rams 2018, they were the furthest left of the dot. I do not understand how this team made the Super Bowl, but they did. And they also played in what was probably the worst Super Bowl ever. 2012 49ers, that was the Kaepernick year. That team scored a lot, was a lot of fun. Didn't win the Super Bowl though. Carolina in 2013. This, I just wanted to point them out, looking at their numbers, they're all pretty good. They're a team that had a really good run. They had a good postseason. They just played a team that was better than them in the Super Bowl and lost. Happens all the time. And Eagles last year, something if anyone noticed, the most dominant team out of all of them was not a winner. It was a loser. And that was the Eagles from this season because they blew out the Giants, blew out the 49ers, and then they were leading most of the game against the Chiefs, but they didn't win. Why? I don't know, but they didn't win that game. But talking about a lot of, other than Denver, just went through a lot of losers because I don't care why a team lost, whether it be one game, one play. You lost the Super Bowl, you lost the Super Bowl. New England in 2014, wanted to put up with there because they're a team that I don't think gets enough credit for how good they were because of the flat ball situation. That's all people remember. But that team was really good. The Super Bowl, of course, everyone remembers the interception. Their game against the Ravens in the divisional round was as good as the Super Bowl. And they kicked the shit out of the Colts in the AFC Championship game. Flat balls had nothing to do with that, and he was going to lose that game regardless. Colts in 2006, they were the they were the kind of on the other end of the Broncos who I started with. Fun score was really low, but they were really dominant. Both the Peyton Manning Super Bowl wins were kind of boring, but they both happened. And Philly in 2017 was my favorite out of all of them. They weren't the best. They were the third best of the winners, but won the divisional round. They were a 1 seed who was an underdog in the divisional round and won. I'm a Packers fan, so anytime you blow out the Vikings, that's a good thing. And then Super Bowl against the Patriots, I think was probably the best Super Bowl we had in a few years until this year. I know my data is not as comprehensive as I would have liked because I had to work by myself this year, but it's what I have. Anybody has any questions, I'll answer them.
Quick question.
Yeah, so what are the two Giants?
All right. The Giants in 2011 are actually that pale blue dot by the bottom. That year was
point because I'm blind.
Yeah, the one right here. They came into the playoffs that year, if I remember correctly, as I know they were a 4 seed because I know the NFC East was really bad that year. But that was the second time they beat New England. And then the first time is this middle dot right here, kind of right in the middle. 2007 is the one that most people remember because that was the year New England was undefeated, but they were the better team, if not a little bit more boring because a lot of their wins were convincing in 2011.
Cool. Awesome. So,
Sorry, can you explain again how clutch attention were?
I didn't do the points I didn't calculate clutchness myself. That was something I got strictly off of Sports Reference. But from what I was able to see going into it, it was like you said for like expected yards above for a player. It was just like that for a whole team. And it was mostly just how good the defense was play if they had really big plays that were maybe called back by penalties, for example, injuries, stuff like that. And then tension there was nothing with that other than I made this up myself just because it was consistent. The one thing about tension is it doesn't put a lot of weight on comebacks because I don't find comebacks as exciting as most people do. That's just one team dominating a half of a game and then the other team dominating a half of a game. But it was just score goes up. If there's overtime or if the game's tied, the score goes down by a little bit. If it's a 2-possession lead, and down by a lot if it's a 3-possession lead.
Do the tension points get like added, subtracted every play?
No, it's every time the team scores.
Oh, okay.
So if the game is tied the entire way and then a team scores 2 quick touchdowns with 5 minutes left, that's a 2-possession lead. So it takes, say, 5 points off for 5 minutes. A game wasn't, or 5 minutes, a game was a 2-possession game. So it's just time, like for these point totals, it was for every minute the game was tied, every minute the game was in overtime, every minute the game was a 2 or a 3-possession game.
The Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl.
That, okay, it's funny you brought that up because Denver was not the lowest overall or least exciting run for a winner. That was Seattle in 2013. And the big reason why was because their entire score, their dominance was fun and their clutchness was good, but their fun and their tension for that Super Bowl was horrible because, again, that was the Super Bowl where the snap went over Payday, et cetera, at the start, first play of the game. If there's a Super Bowl I've ever seen that ended on the first play, that one was it. So
good stuff, man. I hate to cut you off, but
that's good.
All right, hockey. It's time to do that hockey.
Right. Hockey. NHL bias toward players born earlier in the year.
So a bit of background. It's known in many youth hockey leagues that players who are born earlier in the year, so like January, February, and March, are overrepresented compared to those who are born in the last few months, so October, November, and December. Thought behind this is that since many youth leagues determine eligibility based on the calendar year, players who are born earlier in the year have more time to develop physically and develop their skills.
Yeah, let's see how relevant it is to the current NHL. So yeah, you can see that it's actually relevant because the mostly people who play in NHL, they are born in the first half of the year, and there are much less people who are born in the second half of the year. Well, maybe this happens only in North America, and maybe the situation is better in Europe, for example. Well, we see that both distributions are still right skewed. I mean, there is the skewness of North America is a little bit heavier, but it's still both right skewed. So it's still a case for both continents. Well, maybe NHL and youth hockey leagues do something against this problem and try to resolve it. Well, we can see that. So we split players in 4 groups. There were rookies, young players, players in their prime, and veterans. And we can see that actually veterans distribution is the least skewed, and young players and rookie players have the greatest right skewness among all these groups. So this means that situation even got worse, and it's still a huge bias. It's everywhere, and it doesn't change over the years. That's it.
Where'd you get the birthday from? Where'd you get that from?
So hockey reference, and just from rosters. We just merged all the rosters of all the teams. and just got the day of the year for everybody. Yes.
With rookies is pretty self-explanatory, but we did young players.
So yeah, the factor was to split them equally to get like data for just equally. So I guess rookies were until 23-year-old, young were from 23 to 27, prime was from 27 to 31, and others were wet. So yeah, that's how it was.
Good stuff. Robbie. Oh.
Hey everybody, I'm Robbie.
Hi, Robbie.
Where's the present button?
Slideshow. Up top,
At the top.
go right. Not that far right.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, cool. Awesome. So going into this project, I kind of wanted to like motivate myself to continue running, but I really wanted to focus on my visualization skills just because that's something I thought I'd always kind of lacked on. And so I wanted to explore ggplot2 more. I'd never worked with GG Animate, so I wanted to try doing something with that and I wanted to explore possibilities. I put this Krispy Kreme challenge logo because that's like the first long run I ever did. And that's kind of what motivated me to start running and keeping data on it. So first, to expand my ggplot2 knowledge, I worked on just seeing how I could take older graphs that maybe I would just do like a scatter plot and try something new. So in this one, the font used for where it says like plotted mile pace versus steps per mile, that's an imported font instead of just the default one. I think it's Times New Roman. I don't exactly remember. It was going to be Comic Sans at first, but then I was like, no. And then also I tried, instead of just using like a point, I changed it to be the date of each run. Yeah. Next, I wanted to learn GG Animate, which if you've never used it before, it basically lets you kind of make like GIFs or just animations based on what would normally be just a normal plot. So for example, if this was just a normal plot, it might plot this little stick dude running around, might just plot everywhere he went on the run. But instead I can use GG Animate and kind of have him running the path that I took on that specific run. This is also one of the favorite visualizations I made just because it's another thing that I hadn't done before, which was use an image as a point. So I just figured out how to find a stick person online and make that as the point for the graph. Here's some other animations. I also tried, sorry if you get like a seizure or something looking at the one on the right, but he turns red when I was running on an incline and turns blue when I was running on a decline in that run. And then this one on the left here, it kind of just cycles through the overall routes for different runs that I ran up to that point. And also changes color like for each different one, which was something I wanted to try out doing as well. And then this is the last thing I really explored. Hopefully you can see that video, but it's basically a plot where you can go on the point, it hovers and shows you the information about that point. And then if you click on it, it uses a link to take you to show like the landing page kind of for that specific run that I took. Because it's called Map My Walk. So yeah, it keeps a log of each individual run. So when you click on that link, it takes you to like the overall page so you can get all the data for a specific run that I had. And then last, some conclusions that I had was most things appear a lot more complicated than they actually are. Like when I first saw like someone doing a animated plot or something, I'm like, it looks really difficult. But once you kind of get into it, it's like, I don't know, it just looks a lot more complicated than it usually ends up being. Also, I also learned with, for example, the plot where you could click on a point and it would take you to a link. Like I had never seen that done before, but I was like, I think that would be that'd be cool to try to do. So I just Googled it online and I was like, there's a way to do that. So for a lot of things, it's really, if you want to do, there's probably a way to figure out how to do it. So I just need to keep that in mind going forward. And then lastly, this is something I already knew, but it just still rings true. If you ever get lost with a problem, it's just there's always a Stack Overflow page or something with someone that somehow had the exact same problem you did and is willing to help you. So that's it.
Any questions?
How'd you get it to track the incline?
So with the app that I use, the data it keeps is like your latitude and longitude. So I use that to get like the points on the map. And then it also keeps like your altitude, I guess. So I would just do if my altitude had increased since the last point, then I counted that as running on an incline, or if it decreased, I counted that as running on a decline.
Can you do anything? What all can you do with GG and apart from visualizing your spatial?
So I've seen people, I know Philly did a project with baseball. It's like he could show routes players were taking like on the bases. Yeah.
Stuff coming out. Other things I've seen it used for is like bar graphs that like are moving as time goes along. Those are super fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plenty of cool use cases for that.
I've seen plots too where it's like if you have data that goes like year by year, you can have all your points on it, and then for like 2001, let's say, and then 2002 comes, all the points change and move to where they would be for 2002. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain without like a visual, but yeah. Any other questions? Sweet. Oh,
You out of that too.
sweet.
Carl.
So I decided to do the single A versus MLB, and I did it with winning percentage. Got interested with getting hired at the Mudcats, so I figured something to do with single A and how that works. So if you're not familiar with the way minor league works in the MLB, there's really like 4 different levels. So there's rookie ball, but after that there's single A, and then there's high A, double A, triple A, and then you finally, after all of that, make it to the big leagues. It takes like, depends on the player, 3-4 years maybe. Also depending how old they are, usually depends where they start. When you get drafted, you usually go to rookie ball, and then, which is literally just rookies. So single A is the first time you get to experience other people that aren't really like you might have played with college, or like more professionally developed major league, not major leaguers, but professional ball players. So it kind of also gives the GMs, in a sense, a good way if they're a new draft class, like, do they have a lot of good prospects? Do they think they might have potential in the big leagues? So this is an entire graph with the win percentage of the MLB on the y-axis, and then the single A on the x-axis. And then to point out a couple of areas of bigger to more focus on them. These are the top 5 highest win percentages for single A, and then the names are their parent clubs. So you can see, like with a team like the Nationals or the Rockies, or even the Cubs, really, they're not great. They have a better farm system, hence the higher win percentage. But the big outlier there being the Rays. For some reason, they always draft good. Their farm system is always great. I mean, throughout the entire like minor league system, their single A team won. Their the Bulls won, the Biscuits are really good. So something about the Rays, it's just they're different. And then the other thing here, you would think with a lower win percentage, the teams would be actually better, but none of these teams are that great. The Orioles, this was last year, so this is without Jackson Holiday. So maybe that would have improved this year with their single A win percentage. But all these other teams are pretty bad. So that especially surprised me, thinking maybe they would be like the Dodgers or the Astros. But both of those actually are, their single A teams are around 500. So their farm system's actually not bad. But the A's, I don't know, they're just bad. They don't do anything right. Anyways. If you know baseball, I mean, it's the A's, so it's tough. So what I figured I could improve, learn how to use MLB plotter, because having those points and stuff, it kind of looks ugly. Having the logos would improve the visual. Maybe have a user thing so they could input like, hey, I want to look at single A versus like AAA or AA versus MLB. And then I had to manually like align the affiliates with the single A's. So maybe having a way for the code to kind of be able to match those up. So you don't have to manually go through and do all the affiliates. Yeah, that's it.
Did you check if there was a correlation at all between the single A and the MLB win percentages?
No, I
It
didn't.
didn't really look like
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know about the A's, but they just suck. Or the Royals, but like, I think for like the Diamondbacks and the Phillies, they have like really good prospects.
Yeah, that's
in,
true.
Like AAA, so like, is there like any idea like looking at AA and AAA? That's their top prospects.
Yeah, I was focused more on like single A. The other thing is that single A, since it is like years behind, so it's probably more of an indication of like 3-4 years down the road. Like, yeah, the Diamondbacks, they have Corbin Carroll and all those. So like a couple of years down the road, they'll probably be really good, but like 4 or 5 years down the road, they're okay.
Cool, good stuff.
I don't want this view. Oh, okay, that's good. All right. Would anyone like to take a guess? Real quick.
No.
All right, yeah, no, you're right.
Regardless, we're done. Next.
So- Next, presentation over. But yeah, no. So I practiced this like in the library at like 2 a.m. But it went 7 minutes. So I'm just gonna I'm just gonna show you guys the winning stats. The most wins in baseball history consecutively is 2017 Cleveland. The Giants technically have a 25-game win streak, but they had a tie, so I don't count that. Highest winning percentage in baseball history is 763, belonging to the 1906 Cubs, which was a long time ago. And we covered last meeting the 88 wins that UCLA basketball had. That's the longest win streak I could find of any sport, which, if you know numbers, 88 is not 162. So the main objective, making a 26-man roster that has the best chance to go 162 with the stats they had that year. So Aaron Judge, with his 62 home runs, like 690 slugging percentage, he would have those years on this he would have those stats on this hypothetical team. Calculate expected runs scored via weighted runs created plus, which I got from Fangraphs. And then calculate expected runs allowed via adjusted earned run average, which is ERA minus, also from Fangraphs. So for WRC plus, the greater it is after 100, so like 170 is like really good, and 30 would be horrible. And for ERA minus, it's just the other way, so 30 would be really good, and 170 would be horrible. And then just use Pythagorean win-loss record with those expected runs scored versus allowed
to try and get a team as close to 162 as possible. Please move forward. Thank you. But I want to make it harder on myself because why not? So I have 4 restrictions. 1, no steroids, because you can make this very trivial with like Bonds, McGuire, Sosa, Clemens, all those. Number 2 was 1 season per player because Mike Trout literally could be on here 6 times. I'm not even joking. 3rd is post 1998, which is the year that the Diamondbacks and Rays came into existence, because then I could put number 4, each franchise must be represented fairly, because you could just have Jeter, Rivera, Judge, name any of the other people from the 98 Yankees. But that's not fun. So I'm doing this. Also, this makes it so that I have to have at least 4 players who were traded mid-season, which made this a lot harder than it needs to be, but oh well. So this is the final team. Happy birthday to Chipper Jones, because it actually is his birthday. He's my starting 3rd baseman. Look at him go. The lineup I just constructed based off like what the baseball book called the book. Very creative name. I just made it based off of like how they would optimize the lineup, just how I personally would do it. The rotation is just the starters, how I would line them up, and I will pay someone $1 if they know who Mike Adams played for. Exactly.
Is
Not that year. He might. I don't know.
Is Altuve's headshot purposely smaller because he's short?
No. Him and Ramirez were just smaller.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
That'd be great if it was.
Yeah. So this is the full roster with all their stats and the teams. Mike Adams was on the Padres and Rangers in 2011, and those are all their stats. I manually calculated everyone's ERA that they would have, and yeah. If you want to just find your favorite team, find their player, and now moving on. Final team stats. That WRC plus actually is wrong. It's 4 points higher at 172 because I had to remake this team because I forgot Eric Gagne did steroids, so I couldn't have him as my closer. But yeah, no, expected runs scored is 1,281, which is very good. Earned run average for the team is under 2, which is also very good. Their fielding independent pitching is at 2.29. Expected runs allowed is 320. And specifically for Billy, 1 bird was killed. Not in season, but in spring training. Randy Johnson murdered a bird. So yeah, that's fun. Run differential was plus 961, which is very high. Former record was 411 by the Yankees. So yeah. Pythagorean win-loss record, the baseball reference version has 1.83 as the exponent of choice. So that spits out a number of 150 and 12, which is sadly not 162. No, sad. And then baseball, just the regular version, which is 2 as the exponent of choice, is just 152 and 10. And then these are the league average stats that I would calculate in the hypothetical year. For average runs scored, I just did an average of each year from 1998 to 2022 because those were the years I was looking at. And for earned run average, I just used that and divided it over, I think, games played, I think. And I didn't include 9-inning games, or I didn't include like extra inning games because that's too much work. So final thoughts, got around 150 wins as a baseline, just looking at aggregate stats. All of them are expected based off like what the previous stats were. Runs can be distributed in different ways to win every single game. The Minnesota Twins in like 87 had a negative run differential and still ended up winning the World Series. Or the more fun way that they could win, which I sadly did not realize until like a day ago, was platooning. So Jim Thome and Miguel Cabrera, if you just flip them against a right-handed pitcher for Jim Thome and a left-handed pitcher for Miguel Cabrera, that's terrifying. That would scare me if I was a pitcher. And so, yeah, no, you could just have your different players platoon in the lineup and just get much better results than just having them hit against a bad matchup. Any questions / angry argument for players I excluded?
if you were to take your restrictions away, like drugs are allowed, you can have as many Yankee players as you want, you go as far back as you're like, if you could do all that, do you think you could have hit 162?
Yes, because you could have just like, I could have just used a Ruth season, a Bond season, a McGuire season. Like I easily think I could have hit 162. It's just a matter of finding a proper way to make every single team represented, which like it could have been done. So I think so, maybe. I actually, no, I'm gonna take back everything I just said, because I think winning percentage would have to be at like 996 for like Pythagorean win-loss record to be like at 162-0. So I could get very, very close and get like maybe 3-2 wins away. So it's, I think the main thing is just you have to get lucky with the way your runs are distributed.
Was there a player or a season that you expect to be on here that wasn't?
Oh shoot. I feel like there was. Who was it? I have on my computer, I had a sheet when I was going through like every day, like I was in here, I would write down players. I was thinking like maybe a Rocky, like Troy Tulowitzki, maybe. I was thinking maybe Beltran for either KC or the Mets, maybe, but yeah, no, I can't really think of anything.
So the roster's 26, there are 30 MLB teams. Which 4 teams did not have a player?
Actually, so if we go back, so I actually had 4 players who were traded
Trae
mid-season.
Turner was Nats, Dodgers.
I feel like there's another.
Phillies, Rockies, Padres, on the right side, about 3 up the bottom.
I could have sworn there's another guy. Oh, and then Fred McGriff in 2001. Rays Cubs. So I did have to find people traded mid-season.
Some good stuff, Topher. So we are going to go over. Thank you all if you're leaving now. Thank you all for coming. So, yeah, have a great year.
We got like 2 graphs. All right, what's up? I'm Hank. This is Alex.
Hello.
We looked at the new like rules in MLB and how it affected stolen bases. So if you haven't been keeping up with baseball, there's like a pitch clock now, and you can only step off. Pitchers can only step off or pick over twice per at bat, and bigger bases now. So theoretically, that would make base stealing easier because it's a shorter distance from the bases. The pitcher can do less to like deflect that. You can't hold, you can't quick pitch, stuff like that. So we figured the best way to look at this would be to look at like a full season of data. So we looked at AA in 2022 because they experimented with all these rule changes, and they're pretty much the same. There's, I think, 1 less second on the pitch clock with nobody on base, but it's almost identical. So this is what we found using a good old Google Sheets graphing mechanism. And so yeah, stolen bases ticked up, stolen base attempts ticked up, like the success rate ticked up a little bit. And that didn't like have a huge effect on runs scored. That wasn't like a massive jump up, but there's definitely like an increase in stolen bases because it's easier. And then small sample size, but this year in the big leagues, we got like a month of data, and that's even like more dramatic. Like you're way more successful with stolen base rate, and they're attempting more bases, more stolen bases than they have in a really long time. I just think these are cool because like the stolen base like success rate was like super low, was a lot lower for a while, just because like you're stealing so many more bases, and the whole concept of like stealing bases isn't worthwhile because they're just giving up an out a lot of the time. Kind of see that trend start to emerge. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And then we just use Baseball Reference, and that's it. Questions? Yeah. Do you think the trend will change, or how do you think the trend will change with MLB? Because you can argue players are faster, catchers are better, obviously.
For sure.
The sheer talent level of the players in LA.
I mean, we just kind of looked at double A because you got like a full season of new rules. But like, I just think the like average success rate of stolen bases is higher now. So there's more incentive to run. Because before it was kind of that whole thing where if you don't have at least like a 75% chance to steal the base successfully, it's not worthwhile to do. So teams didn't run. And now that that rate is higher, like you can see it, stolen bases are way up. Teams are stealing a lot more. Just like watching games, you notice stolen bases and yeah, and for sure players are way more athletic than ever. But
It's still very new, but like within the first 2 weeks of the MLB season, like there was a massive jump. Like it wasn't even like close of like, well, it could be this. Like it was very clear that teams were stealing way more. So
yeah, and it's working. So I don't really see too much change. Anything else?
Well, from Carl, that way you get hired by the athletics by not just roasting them continually. So just for heads up next year, maybe not roast them so much. That's-
All right, I'm gonna be talking about how I predict standings for ACC softball season. So some background, there's 13 teams in softball in the ACC, and only the top 10 make the tournament, which seems like it would be a lot, and it would be kind of like a given that you would make it, but having some problems this year, so we're having to look at this a lot. Top 6 get a first round bye. And then the goal of this whole thing is to make some kind of like table or visualization to represent the probabilities of certain outcomes. So first I had to create a system for predicting the outcomes of games. And then I did Monte Carlo simulations for the rest of the season based on those probabilities, and then visualized it, and then kind of had to turn it into some kind of interpretable thing for the coaching staff. So the first thing was predicting the outcomes of games. So I made a power ranking system. So basically the idea is like for your offensive rating, it's how many runs more you scored on a team than they allow on average. So like if a team usually allows 3 runs a game and you score 5 on them, that's +2 offensive rating. So then I made a model that predicted win percentage based on offensive rating, defensive rating, and then their strength of schedule rank, and then factored out the strength of schedule to predict what their win percentage would be if they played an average strength of schedule. So then I made a model predicting how likely it is that a team is going to win a game based on their power rating and the other team's power rating. And it predicted, from last year, it predicted 68% of games correctly, which is pretty good. So then I did Monte Carlo simulations. So it was more tricky than I thought to even like find the schedules for the rest of the season, because data just doesn't really exist that much in softball. So there was a lot of data cleaning that had to do with that. And then I computed the remaining strength of schedule with the average opponent power ratings they have left in ACC games. And then I did 5,000 simulations for the rest of the season. So each game, a team is given a probability from 0 to 1, how likely the model thinks they're going to win. And then I use a sample function in R, which just predicts, if they're going to win or not. And then, so for the visualization, this is what I ended up with. So this is based on the games through yesterday. So Florida State has the best chance to win the regular season championship. And then right now we're sitting in 10th. It's about 50-50. We make the tournament or not. So this weekend and next weekend is going to have a pretty big impact on that. And then I also probably go back to this later, but I have this for every week so I can compare like my predictions at the beginning of the season and how accurate they were. And then the interpretation that I did was like how many wins we need to clinch a tournament spot. So it kind of hovers between 6 and 8 based on tiebreakers, and like there's ties sometimes when there's like rain delays that go on for too long and games get canceled, and it kind of messes the whole thing up. So the wins needed hovers between 6 and 8. So that's something that I try to get across to the coaching staff, how many more games we need to win for the rest of the season. And then this is something that I like to do before every series. So like this is our predictions for our series against Pitt next weekend. So it gives us a 56% chance to get swept, 35% chance to win 1, 8% to win 2, and then 0.7% chance to sweep them. But if we win 2 games, we're in, is basically what the thing on the right says. So this is a good way to get a little bit of a sense of urgency across for our last weekend for the season. Yeah, and that's it. The QR code with my my like LinkedIn and Twitter.
Just
yeah, I'll go on this.
go straight up.
Yeah, so this is, I also wrote a little blog thing. Oh wait, it's not even showing up. What am I doing right now?
Yeah, except the purple.
Is that it? Okay. So I was writing stuff up, but then I got kind of tired of that because nobody was reading it. So these are just my different predictions throughout the season for what's going to happen. And then something else I thought was interesting was these are like the up-to-date power rankings for all the teams. So like right now we're 202nd in the country in terms of power rating. So that's why we have a good chance of getting swept according to this by Pitt. So.
On the like table or whatever, like Pitt was really bad. Like they were worse than us.
Yeah, in the ACC games. So like yeah, because they're 100 out of all their games. So like they're 21 and 23. We're like 15 and 30 or something in all of our games. So it takes into account all the games, not just the ACC ones. Yeah, that's it though.
Any other questions? Yeah. All right, my turn.
So mine's gonna be different than pretty much everybody else's. I just kind of do a quick recap of the past year. I said school year, but it's really just whoa. Display setting. That's goofy. Yeah, so mine's a little bit different because mine's talking about, all the stuff I've done rather than just, one specific project. So starting this past summer, I was an intern for Sports Reference and helped add women's college basketball data to their college basketball reference site. It's really taken off. It's great. It's a great resource for everybody. That involved digging through media guides and finding records of every Division I team back to 1982, which is when the AIAW and the NCAA merged together. So that was a lot of fun. One project I did right around that time, end of last year, I made an R package similar to like what Tyson did, and it had data from the Beijing 2022 Olympics. So I made a project using K-means clustering to cluster biathlon mass start ski by athletes. They ski and shoot. I talked about that project a little bit at the end of last semester. I'm not going to go into too much details, but I found 5 different groups like the elite men, the elite women, and then, kind of mixes in between. So that was super fun. Those are 2 of my favorite graphs from that. This one was similar to, it was Robbie's in that it was like interactive, except it was 3D as well. So that was super fun to do. Over the summer last year, I did some graphs with minor league baseball data. So this was a guy for the Oklahoma City Dodgers that had 2 cycles in 4 games. So I did a spray chart for him, and then my Montgomery Biscuits have made the playoffs for 7 straight seasons, and have lost in the first round of every single one of them. So there's question marks here. That was also a loss in the divisional round, which is just unfortunate. So yeah, that was super fun to work on. Obviously, love minor league baseball. I also did college football graphs throughout the year. So most of these or there's two different really types. The college ball rankings versus the AP poll, once they both started coming out, is how are they similar? How are they different? Use the Spearman correlation. So like this week, they were very, very similar. Not many changes. Like LSU was a big drop. It was higher in the playoff committee's rankings than it was in the AP poll, but everybody else was pretty much straight on that line. And then this one was week to week. How much does this change? So week 5 to week 6, apparently we lost, or no, something happened. And so it was the previous week we were like 10th, and then the next week we were 15. Apparently there was also a lot of chaos this week at the bottom. I don't remember exactly what week that was, but I guess everybody lost. So that was super fun. Whoa. The biggest project I did this past year, I would say, is the Should I Stay or Should I Go project. I presented that in October at the UConn Sports Analytics Symposium. I won first place. They gave me player tracking data and they said, do something with this. So I did this project of when should a runner advance 2 bases or versus stop just at 1 base. I created an XG boost model, which is to model these probabilities. And so the most important variables are kind of listed here. The bigger the bar, the more important it is. And these in the middle are some GIFs that I created, GIFs, however you pronounce it, of the ball being hit. Like this one you can see right here, the ball was hit to right field, and then our runner was advancing from first to third. That had a high probability of being safe at third. It says it's 88%, versus this one, ball's hit to left field, and it was a very low probability of that runner being safe at third. So we just chose to stop at second base. This is me receiving the award at the UConn Symposium. Over the winter, I did a lot of women's basketball graphics. Probably my favorite little thread I did on Twitter was this bottom one here, about Ole Miss, actually. About in the tournament, they had this huge run. They upset Stanford, and it was like, how did they do that? So the biggest thing was they were really good at shutting down people they were good at. Gonzaga was a fantastic 3-point shooting team. You can see a lot of their logos. They'd make around 7.5 a game, shooting 40%. But against Ole Miss, they made maybe, I think it was like 1 and shot below 10%. Which was very crazy. Different other tables I've made. This one was like how many players have scored 20 plus against a certain team. That was super fun because NC State did that quite often. They let one single player have a big game. So I did way too many technical assessments for jobs I didn't get for different baseball teams, and I cannot share those because I'm not allowed to. For NC State athletics this year, I did a lot of different things. I built baseball pipelines with TrackMan data. So there's the TrackMan device that gets all the data, and I cleaned that data and got it to pull from the TrackMan site. It really helped our reporting process. I made a transfer portal shiny app for women's basketball. I'm going to show that in a second. I did play tracking for women's basketball. I had the chance to go to Charlotte and present to their women's and men's basketball analytics. I made a little shiny app to help with volleyball, like different race charts, which is like points scored over time, and probably more, but I probably forgot. But the shiny app for women's basketball is super fun. So what you can do is, it'll take a second to load, but you can select any Division I team, and then that'll populate a second drop-down menu. So like, for example, if we want to say NC State, we can go there, and then it'll populate here with the different players. Let's say we want to do Madison Hayes. So we look at Madison Hayes' stats. It'll pop up a headshot of her, all of her stats and information. And if you click download report, it would download a report. I also made a feature, not just transfer portal stuff, but if you wanted to, like, say we're scouting an opponent, hey, here's some quick information about them as well. The report does not work for the team because it would crash the entire thing. So I decided to keep the app up and going rather than make that one extra feature. After graduation, I have a job with the Indiana Fever, which is a team in the WNBA. So I graduate May 6th and then leave May 7th to go start with them with training camp and everything else. So I'm super excited about that. But most of all, the best part was Sports Analytics Club. Yeah, I can't really say enough. This is my 4th year, last one. David, Tyson, y'all been here when and Brandon too, y'all been here when it's like nothing, and then you look around, we've had all these great projects today. I'm not going to get emotional, not right now, but yeah, super appreciate all of y'all for all the hard work y'all have done and for coming, because this is something that's super fun. Pass me my phone real quick. I was messaging with a former president, and he said something, he said this, he said the current state of the club is the quote wildest dreams version of what we thought when we were founding the club years ago. Seeing the club not just thrive or survive, but thrive is amazing. You've done an incredible job leading the club and doing all kinds of analytics work at the same time. I'm sure y'all have set the club up for future success next year and beyond. So yeah, that really means a lot. This is, I mean, when I was applying to NC State, like seeing the four-time list, I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And then, you know, us being here 4 years later. So thanks, everyone. Yeah, so with that, any other questions or comments? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. It's